Hello. I think now it is time to start. We are going to a third day of the meeting and the session of well-being and sustainability, which will be today and tomorrow. And without losing more time, I'm passing the floor to the chair of the meeting, Gerard Edding from Statistics Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Tihomira, and welcome everybody. Welcome to this third day of the National Accounts meeting, the 20th one. I think we had a few interesting sessions over the past few days. Today we will continue. We will continue with another subject in the SNA and BPM update, and that is well-being and sustainability. Actually, we have 2 days for that. That also stresses the importance of this issue. This afternoon, we will look at 2 aspects. The first one is the broader framework and satellite accounts, and the second one is on distributional accounts. Well, both are topics which are also in the real interest of our users. Usually a lot of demand, especially on distributional accounts now these days. So I think we will have a very interesting session ahead this afternoon, which thus will be continued tomorrow when we have another session on sustainability and well-being. And for this afternoon, Catharina van Rompuy from the World Bank will be the chair, and Jorrit Zwijnenburg from the OECD will act as moderator for this session. And well, I wish us all a very nice and fruitful session. And with that, I pass the floor on to you, Catherine.
I think
actually, Jorrit will be chairing the session. Sorry, Gerard, and I'll be chairing tomorrow's session.
Sorry.
So I'll give the floor to Jorrit first.
Sorry.
Thank you very much,
Sorry,
Catherine.
the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gerard. A last-minute change indeed to the proceedings. Sorry for that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session indeed on well-being and sustainability. Very important topic of high policy interest. Indeed, it has been acknowledged now for the past 10 years that well-being sustainability is a very important topic. It has been acknowledged that the system of national accounts is covering a lot of information, a lot of useful insights in the economy. But to have better insights in well-being and sustainability, it's important to also look at some other indicators. This is why well-being and sustainability has been defined as one of the priority areas in the SNA research agenda. And over the past year, we have made a lot of progress in this area on various areas related to the topic of well-being and sustainability. So in these 2 days, we would like to update you on the progress on these various topics. So as Gerard already mentioned, today we will focus on the broader framework and the developments on developing satellite accounts in countries. And after the break, we will focus on distributional accounts. And tomorrow we will focus on labor, education, and human capital, and on environmental economic accounting. And the sessions tomorrow will be chaired by Catherine. So today, the first session will focus on the broader framework. So this will start by a presentation by Catherine and myself to inform you on the ongoing work of the task team that is developing a broader framework. This will be followed by a presentation by Francisco Bien from INEGI Mexico on the development of satellite accounts in Mexico. And then we will have a presentation by Anne-Lisbeth Brathaug from Statistics Norway on the developments on satellite accounts in Norway. We will first have these 3 presentations, and then we will open the floor for discussion. For this purpose, you are invited to put your questions and comments in the chat. John Mitchell from the OECD will act as moderator, so he will summarize the main comments in the chat and give the floor to the presenters to respond. For the presenters, we all have 15 minutes for our presentations, so please try to stick to the 15 minutes. You when there is 3 minutes left in the presentation. Please also try to talk clearly and not too fast in order for the the interpretation. And with that, I would like to hand over to Catherine for the first presentation. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Jorrit. I'll share my screen.
It's not coming yet.
Might just take a minute. Seems to have.
No, I don't see it coming.
Oh, here we are. I have it on my screen.
Yep.
Do you have it, Jorrit?
Yep.
Okay.
There it is. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Well, good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to lead off this two-day session on well-being and sustainability in the context of the system of national accounts. As Jorrit mentioned, I'll be sharing the presentation with him. He has the privilege to do double duty as chair and presenter in this session. And we're going to discuss the state of play on developing a broader framework on well-being and sustainability within the new SNA standards. Slides in this. Do you still see my slides?
I still see it, but it's indeed not advancing.
Try one more time. Doesn't seem to advance.
Otherwise, we may ask the UNEC to take over and to launch.
Catherine, you need to click on your presentation and change the slides there. Yes.
I was clicking in the wrong spot.
There you go.
Okay. There we go. Everyone can see now?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. So for this presentation, I'm going to start off by giving you a bit of background on the approach we're taking to developing the broader framework. For some of you, this material will be familiar as we have presented it in this forum before, but I thought it would be a useful reminder to set the context for the discussion. So I'll go fairly quickly through these introductory slides, really just to highlight a few key points that I think will be helpful for the subsequent discussion. And then I'll hand it to Jorrit to discuss the status of the SNA guidance, some of the highlights of the guidance that has already been developed in each domain, and the next steps in putting this together as a coherent framework, some challenges around that. So I hope that'll be the bulk of the presentation as well. Our goal within the context of addressing well-being and sustainability in the SNA is really to appropriately address the agenda within the context of our fully integrated accounting system. And we want to do so in a manner that recognizes well-being and sustainability as a complex and multidimensional phenomena. And to the extent possible, elaborate various elements outside the standard production concepts, which are often misused as indicators of societal progress. In this elaboration, we also want to recognize that we're in an era of increasing polarization, where these production aggregates are increasingly different from household well-being. So emphasis of the SNA. Now, there's a number of very familiar existing material that has influenced the shape of our work on sustainability and well-being in the SNA. Of course, the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi recommendations, 2009, and subsequent follow-ups, which really look at emphasizing income and consumption in the household sector, looking at the wealth aspect and giving more prominence to distributions and non-market activities. There's also SNA guidance on satellite accounts, and significantly in 2018, the Conference of European Statisticians initiated an in-depth review, which was undertaken by Statistics Canada with support from international organizations. This in-depth review really distinguished thematic satellite accounts, so the example being tourism, from those that address well-being sustainability, and recommended to the Intersecretariat Working Group on National Accounts to prepare guidance on an expanded SNA framework, which would bring on board some of this well-developed guidance in this domain. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to announce today that the CES in-depth review also recommended the development of an online inventory of satellite accounts compiled by countries, and it is now available. It's still a little bit in development, particularly the CS side, so it does also address the system of environmental economic accounts, which is not exactly a satellite account, but more a companion set of standards. And there's still some work to do to integrate CS survey, but I had a look at it, and I would encourage you to take a look. The link is included in the PowerPoint, and it contains a lot of useful information. That information will also be very useful to us as we look at the implementation of satellite accounts in these relevant domains for well-being and sustainability. Also, outside the macroeconomic statistics sphere, there was the development of well-being dashboards and indicator frameworks. Here I'm showing OECD, but they've also been developed in many local contexts to meet local information needs. And of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are really a policy target setting mechanism, but they have an underlying indicator framework which warrants consideration. Also, estimates of comprehensive or inclusive wealth, so expanding kind of the notion of and assets are gaining momentum and offer new insights into sustainability by augmenting the traditional wealth concepts of financial capital to include natural and human capital. Social capital being recognized as an important dimension, but no means to monetize that has yet been developed. So these examples and some international organizations such as the World Bank, where I now work, release states and are continuing to develop these methods, and they really have some very interesting findings that can shed light in a whole variety of local settings and levels of development for a range of countries. So our proposed guidance, the idea, our proposed approach to developing the guidance, the idea is that we really have to define some kind of a feasible scope to this exercise. And where do we draw the line in terms of bringing in elements to understand well-being and sustainability? The approach that we've decided to follow, I would call the Ven approach from Peter, very influenced by Peter, the pragmatic way forward. If we could, we would ideally develop a very elaborate overarching framework that would have linkages to microdata, but this is perhaps not achievable for the next SNA update, and a more realistic goal is to have regular compilation of extended modules that draw on this body of guidance that is already available in satellite account frameworks. And there would be flexibility in the frequency of compilation, in the integration of, and also allow for the integration of non-monetary measures as appropriate. And you'll see some examples of this further along in the presentation. Areas of consideration, I'll just go to the next slide because they're also mentioned here. And just to a reminder about the Wellbeing and Sustainability Task Team. So I co-chair the task team. Now I'd like to welcome Gabriela Saborio from the Central Bank of Costa Rica, who has recently taken over from Carol Coy as co-chair, and we really thank Carol for all of her contributions to date. The Secretariat is, of course, the OECD, with Peter and Virginie, Jort and Virginie. Now Peter, regrettably, from my perspective, has retired, although he has really contributed very substantially to the development of the guidance to date, and we hope that he'll find ways to remain involved with our efforts. There are 6 area groups that are all listed here. The broader framework I chair, there's the distributions, the unpaid work, which you would have heard from already in last meeting. You are going to hear tomorrow from Michael Smeads on labor, education, and human capital, the guidance that has been developed. You've already heard on social health and social conditions and some of the aspects of the environmental economic accounting. And I'd also like to just mention that Joe St. Lawrence has recently taken over that group from Mark DeHaan. And we want to thank Mark, and we want to also welcome Joe to this task team. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jorrit so that he can tell you more about the status of the guidance and some challenges that we're having. And Jorrit, you can just let me know when you'd like me to change slides.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Catherine. So just to update you that we have done a lot of work with the various groups over the past year. So now we have quite a few guidance notes available for global consultation. So this concerns the distributional work, the unpaid household activities, the work on the labor accounts, education, human capital, and health and social conditions. And as mentioned by Catherine, for environmental economic accounting, we have several guidance notes. So two are already available for global consultation, so related to ownership and depletion of natural resources and on emission permits in the national accounts. And we think these will become available over the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out and please provide us with your feedback. So turning to the next slide. So whereas we already have done a lot of work, there is still some work to do. So in the area of environmental economic accounting, there are a couple of guidance notes still in progress. So these are listed here, and some are under consideration. And there is also still some work to do on developing the broader framework, and I will come back to that in a few slides. So turning to the next slide. Just to give you a flavor of the main recommendations in the various guidance notes. So looking at the distributional work, here the proposal is to include increased granularity within the central framework, breaking down the household sector into more granular household groups. So we will hear more about that after the break when we have the session on distributional accounts. On household unpaid service work, here the proposal is to extend the production boundary in supplementary tables to also account for unpaid work, volunteering work, breakdowns focusing on routine housework, shopping, caretaking, volunteering, travel, etc., and also to include non-monetary items related to the hours spent on these activities, possibly also looking at the time spent on leisure time. And these would be as extended accounts. Health and social conditions. Here, the proposal is to provide more detailed information on healthcare, looking at healthcare functions, providers, financing. So having some additional detail in supplementary tables for that. And finally, for labor, education, and human capital, there is the proposal for more extended accounts to account more for the impact of labor on the economy, focusing on jobs, the number of persons employed, hours worked, payments, etc. Also focusing on a satellite account, on education and training, and also exploring the possibility of information on human capital. And tomorrow we have a session dedicated to this specific topic. So at that occasion, you will hear more information. Turning to the next slide. So on environmental economic accounting, the guidance notes available, focusing on ownership and depletion of natural resources, stressing the importance to clearly define ownership, not only focusing on the legal ownership, but also focusing on who is benefiting from the extraction of natural resources, and stressing the importance of accounting for depletion to have a more inside view on sustainability aspects. Guidance note on biological resources, mainly focusing on how to distinguish between cultivated assets and non-cultivated assets, trying to bring it more in line with the system of environmental economic accounting. And then finally, the treatment of emission permits, consideration of the atmosphere as an asset. And this will be a specific topic for the session tomorrow on environmental economic accounting. So more information at that occasion. Turning to the next slide. So now focusing on the development of the broader framework. So we have these various topics within well-being and sustainability, and the main challenge now is how to bring all this information together. So as you will see, the proposals for the various subgroups, they have various implications. So making proposals for more granular product breakdowns in the supply and use tables, more granular industry breakdowns, also focusing on more granular asset breakdowns, sector breakdowns, also making suggestions for supplementary non-monetary information, The various guidance notes also propose breakdowns according to socio-demographic information. In some occasions, it's an extension of the production boundary in supplementary tables, extension of the asset boundary, and in some occasions also proposals for new tables. So the challenge will be how to bring all this information together. So turning to the next slide, in bringing all this information together, it's important to have a look at the various links between these specific groups. So for example, looking at healthcare, education, these may also be provided in the form of unpaid household activities. So it might be important indeed to make the link between these two specific aspects. Also, labor accounts, distributional information would also benefit from an extension to include information on unpaid household activities. And then, for example, also environmental economic issues that may affect healthcare, and then healthcare may feed into the development of human capital. So there are all these links. And then what we see is that a lot of the groups also provide or make suggestions to have breakdowns by socio-demographic groups, for example, by age group, by labor market status, by gender. So this is also important to bear in mind when setting up the broader framework. So turning to the next slide. So the main challenges for the group focusing on the broader framework is how to align the various proposals. So in any case, align where they propose similar breakdowns so that they align across the various topics. And then to see what we would like to include in the core tables. So there are a lot of proposals for additional breakdowns, and it would be very interesting to have them all, but it's probably not feasible. It's going to be very, very big tables that will be caused in that way. So the main challenge is to see what choices to make, what breakdowns to include in the core tables, and what should be moved to supplementary tables. And then also how to present this information. So creating new indicators on the basis of cross sections of the various proposals, and providing the best insight in well-being and sustainability. Turning to the next slide. So the next steps for the group, we are trying to specify the specific breakdowns proposed by each of the group, to have a detailed look which tables are going to be affected, what additional breakdowns are going to be targeted, and then to try to align where needed and where necessary. So we're also assessing links that we want to draw between the various groups. So we already are working on a discussion note for this purpose, and we would very much welcome feedback from you and from users on specific links that you would like to see in such a broader framework. And we also would like to explore the possibility of making a visual diagram, how to bring it all together. So in that way, we hope to draft some proposals on how to combine this information, and also to show some additional indicators that we would like to create in this area. And at the same time, an important aspect is what do we want to show in the core accounts, the central framework, what in extended tables, and what in supplementary tables. Also exploring what specific labels to put on these tables. So that's what we are going to work on in the coming period. So thank you very much for now, and glad to see your comments and questions in the chat. So thank you very much. This was the first presentation. So this was an overview of the broader framework, and now we are going to have two presentations focusing on the development of satellite accounts in some of these areas, and the specific experiences of two countries, Mexico and Norway. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Francisco Guillen. Francisco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Horit. I will try to share my presentation. Let me know if you could see my presentation.
Not yet.
Yeah, let me. Is now? Yeah,
it's coming. It's coming. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can you set it to full slide? Yeah. Perfect. Thanks.
Now is Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in this session. So I will try to explain something about the experience with the implementation of the satellite accounts. And the first thing that I would like to say that is not in my presentation. We now with these satellite accounts and other information we publish in an experimental way the social account matrices that we could use the satellite accounts and cross with this information to look different ideas. For example, the views about the capabilities of the workers by industry, and that means in some cases that we could uh, show by level of education what are the income and what are the benefit that received by industry the workers. This is only a small commercial, but on the other hand, I have to say that in the case of Mexico, of course, the satellite accounts becomes part of the world bank, and I will show you in my next or couple of slides what means in the case of Mexico, especially because we are looking both sides. The For one hand, the conceptual view and the possibilities to extend the response of our national accounts, and on the other hand, to satisfy the idea of the World Bank in relation with some needs in Mexico with some specific uh, government uh, government politicians that they use for to try to look something in relation with the decision it has by law to do. On the other hand, well, here in this, I like so much this slide because one important thing that we believe is to, in the case of the report by the Commission on the measurement of economic performance, as Catherine is showing in her presentation, well, Stiglitz and Fitoussi, these reports recognize the idea about the changing of the GDP, and that they recognize that we have to look now, especially in the COVID conditions, we have to look or to measure the well-being from one hand, and on the other hand, we have to maintain the central framework, especially when we are talking about the gross domestic product. In this case, well, everybody wants to know and to extend this variable on the national accounts, but this variable it gives us the idea about the economic growth in the case of Mexico. So, and one example here is that we have to look different points in relation with the national accounts. And of course, here we could look, for example, the type of production, and we could see within the production boundary some extensions to look sectors to look more granular data in relation with the production, and of course another thing is to cross and have an extension of the production boundary to explain some of the specific well-being happening in my country. On the other hand, for example, and to extend the market production, we could see the idea about what means the services produced by the volunteer work. and it's the same in the case of the non-market production, on the other hand. And well, one more important thing here is when we are talking about the production for own final use, and that means that we have to get more granular data in relation with the unpaid domestic services from one hand, and on the other hand, for services produced with the volunteer work and workers. Um, well, other, I cannot move my slides. Let me check why. Uh, Well, uh, yeah. Another thing is, uh, in the case of Mexico, of course, we have around 7 or 8 satellite accounts. And the main task that we are doing here is what to exploit this information to have a cross-cutting between these satellite accounts to give more information in relation with the well-being. And here, of course, we have our first satellite accounts was the environmental accounts that we did in at the first time in 1991, and of course, one of each of these satellite accounts we have to produce during these years, uh, and another challenge was to publish this information regularly to give this granular data and to extend the views about the national accounts. And of course, the most current data is now from 2019, and this year the data we disseminate data for the quarterly information in 2020. And this is very important because in the case of the tourism sector, we have to look at quarterly information about the tourist sector gross domestic product and consumption, especially because the impact in Mexico was very big for our pandemic views. And just to give some uh, points, uh, the idea here is look the figures. For instance, the unpaid working households means in the case of Mexico from around 23%, and that means that the effort that the households needs to have a better well-being, and that means another thing in relation with decision taking by the governments or the private sector to push the well-being and to support the work that are doing the households from one hand. And in the case of tourism, and I have not to put inside uh, uh, some specific conceptual points, but here the tourism sector represents 8.7 of the GDP, and this gives us another view in relation with internal tourism and external tourism. And of course, we are looking many things in relation, of course, of the satellite accounts with the environmental. That means another thing that we have to look in our country, especially in this moment that we exploit a lot of natural capital resources. And of course, we have to believe on these things. And here, I will try to say that the results of the satellite accounts is used in the case of Mexico for planning or for create some regulations in different areas. For example, in our national development plan, we have to look some specific points in relation with well-being And in these plans, we have different ways to look the environment, to look what happened with the house, with the households. With, of course, we have to look some specific points in relation for distributional income. Another, we have a program from the Ministry of Tourism that they have a specific policies in this sector. On the other hand, we have the general law of ecological balance and environmental protection, and I have not to say from each laws and programs, but more. But that means the needs that we have for this information in relation to decision taking for the government, and to have a granular data to uh, uh, to satisfy, of course, this idea of the sustainability, the well-being, and other points. On the other hand, uh, uh, the satellite accounts in the global view. We have different demands, not only for has granular information in the decision making. Of course, we are looking for the SDI indicators, the H targets, and we have to look to monitor in a very strong way the idea of inclusive sustainability, or sustainable and resilient post-COVID recovery. And in the case of Mexico, we have a lot of work in relation with this this idea to have an economy and a well-being resilience, or resilient. And this means another experience and effort that we did. With this, uh, let me, well, with this, I would like to say only some conclusions, and this means that our conclusions is in relation with the statistical tools, and that is the part that we have to do as a producer, is to give data from to the users in relation with the satellite accounts. This is one thing, and of course, to the statistical community to incorporate and to give to our users the idea about the development and well-being. On the other hand, other conclusion is in relation with the what the satellite account shows, and in this case, we have to look the economy as an integral part, with different views, and extending the capacity of the system of national economy of Mexico. These satellite accounts contribute to more informed decision making for the social and the environmental sectors. With this, I would like to thank to all of you, and I will listen, or I will see the chat about uh, our presentation. Thank you very much.
Very much, Francisco, for this very nice presentation. It's really impressive to see what INEGI Mexico has accomplished in terms of satellite accounts. It's really nice to see the amount of satellite accounts, and also very nice to see how these various results are used for different purposes. So thank you very much for that. Then we will turn to Anne Lisbeth for a presentation indeed on the satellite accounts as developed in Norway. So Anne Lisbeth, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to share with you. And there is Yes. Now you have the presentation on your screens as well. So I was asked to say something about the Norwegian system for satellite accounts, and we have different types of accounts. I will not talk about all of these which I have listed here, but I will go more in depth in those I have not read. But still, I want to mention that we have the system of health accounts. It was established in 2005 and with time series back to 1997. We have the satellite accounts for education and training that is new, established a couple of years ago, and with the data starting from 2015. And we have a satellite account for non-profit institution established in 2010, and with 2006 as the starting year. In addition, we have unpaid household work. They are compiled every 10 years and covering the year from 1970, 80, 90, 2000, 2010. And these years are chosen just because that's when we have time use surveys. So we have, since the 19th, we have had satellite accounts for tourism and with long time series, and we have the system of economic and environmental accounts. This system was established in 2002, and it is the division for national accounts that compile, should I say, the link between the economic data, energy use and emissions, and then emission to air, and present the growth in energy and emissions intensity, for example, the emissions per produced unit or produced value added, and it's by industry. The national accounts do not do the physical energy accounts or the physical emission accounts. That is done in another place in Statistics Norway, which also we have a long tradition for do this, for instance, energy and resource accounts. And they are closely related and built up in the same way as the national account, which makes it quite easy to link. I said I would concentrate on the three which I marked red, so I go directly to the system of health accounts. This system, as I said, we established in 2005, and then based on the system of health accounts, the manual for it, which came, the first version of this manual came in 2000. And so that was what we based it on, and we linked it to the national accounts when we established it. It's a triaxial system defining consumption of healthcare services by healthcare functions, by providers, and also showing the financing of the healthcare. And as I said, we linked it to the national accounts and the supply and use framework within the national accounts. So in a way, we are mapping the national accounts product directly, for instance, to healthcare functions and to providers, etc., etc. I will not tell how we do this because my intention today is more to show what we can get out of these systems, what stories can they tell. So it's a kind of motivation for why we think it is important to have them. So, but it is also important to say that the way we have built it makes the system very efficient to run, to operate. And in another important issue for me to say is that these satellite accounts, which we have linked so closely to the main system, they also give positive feedbacks to the, should I say, core national accounts. And when we established this, it was financed by the Ministry of Health, which were at that time very interesting in having this system. And so, why do we think it is important? I think you will have problems with reading all these figures, but that you can see later on if you want, if you would like to go more into depth. The thing now I want to say is that, well, the table I show here to the left is what we call some key figures. There are a lot of details within the system, within the health counts. And so these are highlights. So we say then what can be important. Say we say the current health expenditures, also divided per capita. We do it in constant prices, so we are able to show the growth rates, how the growth in volume are going, and another thing is to show the share of share financed, for instance, by private sources or by household. And in Norway, households, well, they finance about 14% of the total health expenditure, and the rest is financed by the government. We also show the health expenditure as a share of GDP, and that is more or less about 10, vary from 9 point something to 11 point something percentage of GDP. To the right, there is a figure. Unfortunately, it's in Norwegian because I just copied it from a publication. But and the point with this is to show, well, it shows what shares we use. For instance, the green, large green, is curative care. The black one is long-term care. Is the share allocated to long-term care. The yellow one is medication and both over the counter, it's over the counter, and also other both medication and other medical equipment you need. So this is just to show a way, well, you can see curative care is the large part of this. And you also have supportive services, which is not very hard. You have, it's not a very large share actually, and you can see prevention, and you also have administration. So this is a way of sharing how does what kind of functions, healthcare function does the money go to? The large green part, which I showed you, can also be distributed by a more detailed function. And here you can see inpatient curative care. That's hospitals. That is half of it. We have, perhaps I should have said earlier, but we have data up to 2020. Both 2019 and 2020, they are preliminary. And perhaps someone is wondering, why is the share for inpatient curative care lower in 2020 than in 10 years earlier and 20 years earlier, especially now with the corona pandemic. So, as I said, the data, they are preliminary, and we also know that, and we see from the data, that admissions in hospital decreased, or especially planned admissions in the hospitals, they decreased. So so far, it seems like we have not spent so much money on healthcare during the pandemic as we thought. But it might also be misallocation from this early data. So we see that specialized outpatient curative care has increased. So it may change this picture. But more or less, the specialized outpatient care, that's the second last part of this figure. And you can also see that general outpatient curative care amounts for about 15% of the total part for curative care. And dental care is about 10% of the total. So that is a way to see where, when we go more in detail, what can we get out of it. So I also show you here that in addition to these figures, we have also linked employment data to it. So we can look at also, if you would have liked to see hours worked, I could have shown you figures on that, but I just picked out employed persons, and they are here just shown by this ambulatory healthcare, resident long-term care, and hospitals. And the black box, which is or the black bars, which are that's the long-term care facilities, and most of the staff is related to that part. But you can also see a decrease in the employment in hospitals. The second satellite account I want to say a bit more about is what I call the new one we have established. That is for education and training. And it is based on the UNECE, the compilation guide, which came in 2020. And we started, Norway had a piloted the system in this guide. So that meant we also started publishing at a regular basis. And we have set this expenditure on education and training. As with the health account, we show it by provider, by purchaser, and by financing sector. It's built up in a very similar way as the system of health accounts in our system, I can say. So it can be supplemented with non-monetary data for the population, enrolled students, teachers, employed persons, etc., etc. Just use your fantasy to see what you can combine with it.
And Lisbeth, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes left, yes. The production boundary, well, in the satellite accounts, we have extended the production boundaries. So by estimating in-house training, this do not, in the way we have done it, do not change the GDP estimates. And we see this as a starting point for human capital compilation from the expenditure side. This is just 2 tables, the one showing the expenditure from the supply side and from the use side. No, this is the key figures showing that the expenditure on education is about 6% of GDP. And you can see expenditure by pupils. Here we have split them on pupils for different education purposes. And so I showed here, you can study, that's the supply and use table. You can see who provides the services and who pay for them or use them. I did not put up the financing of it, but that's also possible to see exactly in the same way, so can be combined. The last thing I wanted to say something about is the satellite account for non-profit institutions, and this is based on the UN handbook, which you see here. This was established, the establishing of these accounts was proposed in a white paper from the Ministry of Culture to the Parliament. It was called voluntariness for everybody in 2007 already. And it was a strong pressure from professional, industrial and voluntary organizations to establish this. And they said you need more insight into these non-profit institutions as their activities cover a wide area and through service production and voluntary efforts, they contribute to fulfilling important objectives of well-being. This to the left, you can see just the impressing figure, but the point with this is that the blue part is what is outside the scope of the national accounts. That is the production, and we have just shown how it can the providers and how it is distinguished between the different services. And you have, as we have for other things, key figures, key results. But what is most interesting with this satellite account is when we include voluntary work. That's where we get most people, where we got most attention. And when we include voluntary work, value added more or less doubles. And especially high inclusion of voluntary work in culture and recreation. So there we see that it's 9 volunteer men behind each employee. So it's quite substantial, and this is what the media and interest organizations, they are triggering, saying, "Oh, so much voluntary work in Norway going on." So to conclude, the extended accounts or the satellites should be consistent with the core national accounts, but with the possibilities to go beyond, but then also in a consistent way. It gives insight in areas which are too aggregated in a national account to be analyzed properly. Therefore, going to the satellites, you can go more in depth. And there are a lot of possibilities to combine the extended accounts with relevant non-monetary data. And for the future, we aim to distribute also by type of households. So that was what the presentation from me. Then back to you, Jorrit.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Indeed, nice to dig into some of these satellite accounts and to have a look at specific outputs that might be forthcoming from these satellite accounts. And also very nice to see indeed that this can also be used for feedback loops, just trying to further improve the quality of the overall national accounts results. So thank you very much. So we've now heard 3 presentations. The first one on the broader framework, trying to develop more work in the area of well-being sustainability and how to combine all this information. And then afterwards we had 2 presentations on satellite accounts, specific country examples. So I would now like to open the floor. So if you have any questions or comments, please raise them in the chat. I do have some questions myself, but maybe first turning to John, just to see indeed if questions are already coming in via the chat. John?
Thanks, Jorrit. as usual, we have no questions for an hour, and then we have lots of questions in 1 minute. So again, I would encourage people to put the questions down as soon as it comes to you, and that way we can aggregate them easier. We began with Raul from Mexico, and I think this was more a comment than a question, just broadly around MPIs, that it's not just the non-profits now that are helping households, so to speak, and that there's a lot of the social economy or social capital is assisting households, and so there may be a need for a terminology altering there. I think just broadly, I know people have very strong views for or against the use of the term satellite accounts, and so I think that the whole area there's the terminology is still a work in progress, but I'm not sure if any of the speakers wanted to touch on that topic. Tiamira was just asking that obviously flexibility is important because the countries have different priorities and resources, but that in order to really improve the comparability, it is important to have some form of recommended frequency. And so again, I'm not sure if any of the countries wanted to elaborate further. And then the final one for round one was Michael Smeeds from Australia, who was just inquiring that most of the satellite accounts from Norway had a strong labour component, and if there was a bit more about the link between these satellite accounts and the labour account. And sorry, Anne, but I will ask just one further one there, which hopefully you might be able to read the comment from Mantis, just wanting some clarification regarding how the estimates for in-house trading was built up. So rather than me reading that one out, I might let you read that one. Perhaps why Jorrit or Catherine or Francisco maybe respond to some of the more general questions.
John, I think maybe it's good first to go to Francisco. Francisco, you want to answer?
Yes, thank you. Could you listen me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, thank you for these comments. And of course, in the case of the that I have to say, because Raúl Figueroa is my colleague in Mexico, so well, one thing is in relation with the idea of another satellite account that we are doing. This is in relation with the social economy, and that means another view in relation with different sectors, especially with some communities that has a relationship between the agricultural sector, the livestock sector, and that gives us an idea about what could be the efforts in relation with these communities as part of the well-being and the social views that we have in Mexico in relation with some specific activities. On the other hand, yes, we agree with the comment in the case of Tijomira, and of course, one of the most important things that I would like to take around this that we are, of course, the international comparability is another challenge, and in that views the efforts or the demands that we are looking give in our experience some let's say some points to discuss as Anne Lisbeth said before, because in some cases or on the presentation that we see from Horwitz or Catherine, we know that there are diverse views and purpose to satisfy. And of course, one of our challenge here is in this effort is how to get a better consensus to try not only to link with the national accounts concept, and of course to spread with other new concepts that probably in this revision of the national accounts could be taken inside or not, depends on. But on the other hand, we have to look the comparability in a conceptual way, in a practical way. We have to look some different efforts in this with these ideas. And of course, my last comment is in relation of Anne has a specific question and a comment in relation with the Norway satellite accounts. I have not to take this for you, but on the other hand, my last comment is yes, these are new instruments. In the case of Mexico, we have a very large experience, and as I show in my presentation, our first satellite accounts was in relation with the environment, and with this give us the first steps and new instruments, new tools to evaluate, to put inside, and to put with the users on the table for the research from one hand, but the Ministry of Environment now takes these accounts as a new instrument, new tool for decision taking. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks. Then maybe turning to Anne-Lisbeth.
Yes, thank you. I noted that, well, one of these, the question from Michael about the labor accounts and how they are integrated or linked. In Norway, the labor account, we don't look on the labor account as a satellite account, but it's integrated in a normal production process. So when we do the satellite accounts, they are also more or less, the way we do it, then they are also linked to the labor accounts, which means we can extract data for at the same way as we do with the rest of the accounts. It's just the way we are setting them up, which makes us it's possible to do that. It's a question about in-house training. Yes, in-house training is included both for private and public sector institutions, and we have also specific estimates on and separated from the in-house training. We have also estimates for how much, for instance, a private enterprise will pay from buy from the market or of education services. So all this, if you study the supply news table in this, then you can see this data and you can see how they are they feed in. Just do it, and if you don't understand the tables, you can contact me. There was another question about granularity. What about the granularity? Do we really have data for this? And it's surprising how much data we have, especially, well, at least this is the case for Norway, especially because we have very detailed access to very detailed government accounts. And from the government's accounts, we can extract a lot of detailed information, which we normally do not split in a national account, but we combine it now so we can use it with in the satellites. And this is where the feedback to the national accounts comes in and is so important. So actually, there are more granularity in the data than at least we believed before we started. So I don't know if there was
there is a couple more, Anne-Lisbeth, but I might just sort of summarise them because there's a couple that are similar And I think there's a very important one that that perhaps might need to go back to Catherine and Yorit. So Catherine asked a similar question, and Sanjeev also commented similarly, just asking about has there been benefits from doing the satellite accounts that have then been used in the compilation of the national accounts. So Sanjeev supported this and said that from his experience that this is the case, but then just asking what the experience of that might be in Norway and Mexico. And then Lourdes asked a very important question, and I do like the way that he's phrased it at the beginning by talking about how important and these tools are, and they are magnificent, and I would agree with him on that. But he does ask the important question of we are asking countries to do more, and a lot of countries that are still working to put together the core accounts that are now then being asked to do these additional accounts, and that this is a sort of a trade-off, especially for the developing countries. And this links actually to another point made by Catherine about who is financing some of this work. So, and Lisbeth, I noted that in your presentation you had one that was by the Ministry of Health. But I think that this also feeds into the point made by Lourdes that if we are asking countries to compile more information, somebody has to pay for this. So I suppose it's just a general question about how can we assist countries with this lower level of granularity and also do it in an efficient way. So Yorit, I'm not sure who you want to throw to after that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I may go back to Francisco and Lisbeth, and then maybe Catherine and I can come in afterwards. So maybe Francisco, you would want to go first?
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Okay, in relation with these comments or with these questions, of course, when we are looking for the satellite account and more granular data, our in a practical way means that we have to extend some specific, in some cases, some specific surveys. But on the other hand, we have to look the classification that we have inside of the national accounts to have a decision tree to look some specific topics like tourism. And that means, in this case, that we have inside of the national account some information, and we have to complement with other administrative registers or surveys. And this is a very big effort, but at the same time, give us the opportunity when we are producing this information, it will give us the opportunity to have more consistent and coherence data in relation with the central framework of the national accounts. And this is very important, but because we get another kind of information to explain something that we don't know exactly in the central framework of the national accounts. It's not easy to look these points, but the efforts becomes, and we always going to look not the whole satellite account. We look for some specific indicators first that could be the first step to construct the satellite accounts and to look what and to have a diagnosis about what kind of information we need to improve or to create to obtain the whole view of the satellite accounts. Depends on the topic, depends on the phenomena that we are trying to put on the table. This is one thing, and of course, I agree with the Sanjeev comments in relation with this. That give us a very strong and good points to improve the coherence and the consistency of the national accounts, and that give us a very good, let's say, views to understand and to have more granular data for decision taking. And the most important thing here is how to cross these new satellite accounts with the phenomena, and at the same time to obtain this information in relation with the national accounts. It's not easy, but we are trying to do, because the central framework of the system of national account is one of the most important things. If you have a strong national accounts, you could go through the satellite accounts in our views. Thank you very much.
Much, Francisco. Turning to you, Elizabeth.
Yes, I want to address this financing. Well, who is financing these things? And we do need someone to finance it, especially, well, what we saw in Norway was that we needed someone coming in financing the establishment of the new system, but the running of it, the yearly thing, when we have built the system, running it is not that demanding. So we made this model, like for the system of health accounts, the ministry paid for us to establish the system, and we are taking the expenses ourselves. And the same we did also with this satellite account for non-profit institutions that was also financed by the Ministry of Culture at that time. But you need, in a way, to have some, interested bodies there to help you start the whole thing. I think that is important. So, and regarding the question from Sanjeev about feedbacks to the system and if we have the experiences, yes, we do have. And that is when you look into, for instance, in case of health, when you go into and look at the more granular data than you normally have in the national accounts, where you work more aggregated, then you can see, oh, this is not correct. And then when you correct, we also correct immediately in the national account system. So that is it. Since it is more or less the same system, the information we have on the granular data will go back to the aggregates immediately. So I think this is important, and especially for the kind of system we have in Norway, which is a supply and use framework, where we have the product data. And it's very important, for instance, for the deflation process, that we have an idea what the product is. So if the product is wrong, well, then the constant prices will be even wronger, because we then use wrong prices. So I think this is important. And so finally, I want to say that the system of health accounts, it's started many years ago, but for the last years, Eurostat has also been very involved in this accounts, and now it's also a regulation to deliver data to Eurostat on it, and they have and it's a lot of quality issues related to it. So I think this has become a very, very good system, and it's, as it is today, quite more or less linked to the system of national accounts, but there are improvements that could be done, and which we have addressed in the task team we had so bringing it even more into accordance would be good, but actually it is already very close. So I don't know if I had overlooked anything now, but Jorrit?
Otherwise we will come. So I think some very important issues indeed. The flexibility issue is quite relevant, and I think the funding. I think it's good to hear indeed that it is important to reach out to policy users to see if there is an interest for this specific information, and to try to obtain funding. And I think an important element is also the feedback loop. That if you compile results at a more granular level or as extended accounts, there is an important feedback loop providing quality impetus for the results. Just quickly checking in, Catherine, do you have any comments?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just want to react maybe to the points that were made. I guess Tia Mira made the point about we have to sort of talk about if we're going to provide guidance on what type of frequency we would expect these elements of the broader framework to be developed. And I guess a related point, but a more acute point, if you want, is the one that Lourdes made about the capacity requirements of this is a fairly ambitious agenda. If we look at all of these various elements, we look at all of the guidance that we are recommending in these different dimensions. And we've done our best within the task teams to think of what are the ideal measures and what's practically feasible. But when you look at all this as a whole, clearly it's a very high expectation. So we've heard from many users that there is a need to set priorities and to perhaps scale down the expectations in certain cases. Now, the answers for you on that, and I think it is an issue that we really do need to take up in the task team on the broader framework in terms of perhaps setting priorities or establishing hierarchy, because as Tia Mira has pointed out, if we are going to have internationally comparable measures, we do have to have them on some kind of a regular frequency so that we would have coincident estimates in very in different places. So I don't have any answers, but I guess I have a couple of different perspectives on this. One is an idealist perspective that says, if I want to be an idealist, add all the information on capacity, it's clear that estimates for even for countries of more limited capacity or maybe on a lower scale of the development, that they would be extremely relevant. So if we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about the trade-offs, if we're talking about natural resource countries and we're talking about depletion and we're talking about ownership, I mean, they would really enrich the understanding of the path for these countries. That's the idealist perspective. The realist perspective is really, okay, but if we are going to produce these estimates, for example, for the distributions, which is considered high priority among many of the consultations that we've had, we need institutional sector accounts. If we don't have those core accounts, we can't produce those estimates. For many of these different types of elaborations that we're proposing, we require an SUT, so a supply and use table. If we don't have regular supply and use table, then obviously we can't produce that. So there obviously is a balance between this investment in the core, which would then enable these broader more elaborated measures, and the idea that we may actually rejig the priorities in terms of development if we have a broader SNA framework in terms of the statistics that are relevant in a particular country's capacity. So not having any answers, those are kind of I think the considerations that we need to think about in this elaboration, discuss further in the discussions with the broader framework group.
Much, Catherine. Yeah, I fully agree. I think we are presenting indeed quite ambitious proposals, and I think it's good for people to realize that these are proposals for possible extensions, and that some of them might affect the core accounts, but that several are supplementary tables, and that it's really a need for countries to assess the necessity of this type of information. We've heard from Mexico, we've heard from Norway. They are focusing on satellite accounts, but not always the same. So it is up to countries indeed to check with policy users what is of most interest for the country and where should the resources go to. And I think in that conversation, to look at, okay, if this is relevant, where can we expect some funding? So I think bearing that in mind, and I think alluding to the global consultation. In the global consultation, we are sharing the proposals, we are sharing the guidance notes, existing work, existing guidance in various areas, how to compile the results. But I think one of the most relevant questions that we would like to raise with you, with the countries, is this indeed of relevance to your country? How do you regard the feasibility of compiling these results? So in terms of data sources, in terms resources, and I think it's very relevant for the task team on well-being and sustainability to obtain this feedback, so that we know indeed, are we going in the right directions? What are most likely the higher priority areas, and what is needed from our side to assist countries in further developing these results. And I think if you could indeed provide feedback on these specific issues, I think that would be very helpful indeed for the work on the well-being and sustainability side. So this is just to invite you indeed to have a close look at the forthcoming guidance notes and to provide your feedback. I don't know, John, do we have final questions maybe in the chat?
Just a final comment, more than a question, just about further spreading the idea of the health satellite account with possible UN development work that is happening in light of the pandemic. And I think that's a really good point, that I think that there'll probably be a lot more focus across the world in statistical offices regarding health productivity and health output. And so this is a good opportunity to spread the word of the health satellite account.
Thank you very much, John. Then I think we come to a close of these sessions. So thank you very much for the presentations. Thank you, Risto and Lisbeth and Catherine. I think it has been very useful to hear the ongoing progress in countries, and also to have somewhat more information on where the broader framework is going to. The global consultation will take place shortly. We are very much looking forward to your feedback on the various specific topics. Any thoughts on the broader framework that might be of relevance in there? So I encourage you to have a look at that and get back to us. For now, I would like to close the first part of today. We will now have a short break, and I would like to invite you to return 2:45 Central European time. Thank you very much to the presenters, and see you in approximately. Thank you very much.
Thank you.